Welcome to Gordy Fine Art and Framing. It is such a pleasure for us to be with you here tonight on this occasion. My wife and I, Barbara, I'm Carl Schaefer, by the way, and I'm being photographed here quite close. So thank you. Barbara over here and I have been thinking about this exhibition now for several months, and we're invited by Chris Fluke, who is from the Delaware County Historical Society, to show some photographs of Hurley Goodhall and his career and his era, so that we can perhaps raise some money for an effort that they're running to raise a statue of Mr. Goodhall over in Fireman's Park. And I can't think of anything more wonderful than that. So, a couple of very important people are here tonight. Chris Fluke from the Delaware County Historical Society, Michael Chayefsky from the Ball State University's Archives and Special Collections. Mayor Dennis Tyler is here with us tonight. Julia Sanderson is here. And of course, Hurley Goodhall himself. We're hoping tonight that you'll take a little trip down memory lane. And also, for those of you who may be too young to remember Mr. Goodhall's career, to reinvent and reinvigorate his memory and his accomplishments. So that's really important for us to do both of those things, and we think that eventually the statue will be a permanent reminder of his major accomplishments for all of us. So thank you very much for that. In an effort to raise money for that statue, we have displayed photographs that are from the Ball State Archives and Special Collections, and it's not often that you can purchase a photograph out of an archives, right? So you can purchase these photographs, one or all of them, either framed or unframed, and the proceeds, portion of the proceeds, goes to that statue effort. So if you're interested, if you're particularly moved by any of these photographs, please see us about that. Also, if you know anybody in these photographs that we may not be able to name on the labels, let us know that too, because we don't know everybody that's in this. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Fluke.
On behalf of the Historical Society, to Carl and Barb, where's Barb? Thank you for helping us here. This has been one of the easiest things I've ever had to do in my life, is to raise money, because I don't talk to anyone about the statue or the project without them being like, oh sure, let me go get my wallet, you know. And working with folks like Gordy's, because they see the value in everything that he's done, in what the statue could bring to the city of Muncie, and to be able to help fundraise it. We appreciate it. And to you, Michael Chayefsky, and all your folks at the library, thank you for making these things available. And then to everyone who's here to support us for it. So what I can do is just briefly talk about the philosophy of the project, some housekeeping issues just in terms of where we are, and then where the deadline that we're sort of anticipating to have the statue up. The first thing is that statues, as you probably all know, are a pretty bad way to teach history, right? The context by which they go up cannot always be carried out over generations. Statues, public artwork, has a role to play, though, in teaching history, in that they celebrate the values which we should be wanting to uplift in our community. And by permanently fixing it in the landscape, it means that for generations then, as historians at the Historical Society, we use the statue as a catalyst to interpret everything that Mr. Goodhall has done, everything that he has stood for, and as many of you know, when he was done with his professional career, he became a historian. And so we have relied a lot at the Historical Society on his own research on local African American history to do our own programming. And so to take all of that work and then use his legacy through the statue to really communicate that. And that really is our goal. So for all of you that have supported us, thank you. But most importantly to you, Mr. Goodhall, thank you for everything you've done to make Muncie a place that we can be all very proud of living in. Thank you. Housekeeping issues, we have raised about $30,000 for the statue so far. $20,000 has come from the Ed and Virginia Ball Foundation. $5,000 from the Harry and Janet L. Kitzelman Fund, and then $5,000 or $6,000 from individuals. We have about no, that's not true. We have $80,000 in grants that we're waiting to hear back from. So we'll know by November how much money we have, but we anticipate having enough to at least get the statue built and casted and then ready to go. The remainder of the money will go towards landscaping issues at, get some lighting and some trees cut down at Fireman's Park, and then we're going to have a maintenance fund. So for cleaning, and God forbid anything should happen to the statue, that we've got something long-term to there to protect it. But I feel very confident that we'll have it ready to go. The artist, Bill Wolf, if you've ever flown out of the Indianapolis International Airport, you come up the escalators to see the statue of Ware Cook. He did it. He just did a statue of Vincennes, Larry Bird, and Terre Haute. He does a lot of Hoosier grade, so he's a totally appropriate person to do the statue of Mr. Goodhall. If we have money in place by Thanksgiving, the statue, he builds a mold and it will be ready by February. It goes to Sinceris Foundry in Indianapolis where it gets cast. And then concurrently, our partners at Community Enhancement Projects will then begin work on the park. And then the idea is on his birthday, May 23rd, right? 23rd, is that we'll dedicate the statue. That is an ambitious goal, so if we fall short on our fundraising efforts or for whatever reason we don't make it, it'll just happen some other time in summer or fall. But we really feel confident that it's going to happen next year. So I think that's it. Who am I turning it over to?
We'll turn it over to Michael Shayevsky.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you, Carl and Chris, for those remarks. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here with you this evening. A great turnout, as always. First Thursday, one of my favorite events in Muncie. It's just great to see so many people enthusiastic about the Muncie community and about all the exciting things going on here. As Carl said, my name is Michael Shayevsky, and I head up the Archives and Special Collections program at Ball State University Libraries. And tonight, we unveil Hurley Goodhall, Muncie Icon, an exhibition that highlights historic photographs from the archives. In Bracken Library, that document the career and legacy of Hurley Goodhall, a truly remarkable Munsonian and leader. The photographs on the wall behind me depict Mr. Goodhall's service to Muncie as a firefighter and community leader, his service to the state of Indiana as a legislator, and his work to celebrate and preserve the cultural legacies of African Americans in Muncie. I'll tell you a little bit more about the archives. We're located on the second floor of Bracken Library and Ball State University Libraries. Our mission and goal is to preserve, collect, describe, organize, and provide access to critical and important cultural records of Muncie and Delaware County's history, of Ball State University history, and of the history of Indiana architecture. Our materials are available to scholars, to students, and to the general public. We have a large digital repository that makes many of these resources available freely and discoverable online. So I encourage you to check that out in the Ball State University Digital Media Repository or visit us on the second floor of Bracken Library. I'm really proud to have the opportunity to work in this department because we have some truly wonderful cultural resources that we've been have the privilege of preserving and providing access to. So that's the archives. I just want to say some thank yous quickly. I'd first like to thank Carl and Barbara Schaefer of Gordy Fine Art and Framing, this lovely place over here right now, who really developed the idea for this exhibit and approached me about using materials from the archives. Their tremendous hard work, initiative, and vision has been absolutely critical to the success of this exhibit, and it's been a real pleasure working with you. So thank you so much, and especially thank you for your generosity in donating the proceeds to this statue effort. Also, great thanks is owed to my colleagues, past and present, who have worked tirelessly to catalog, preserve, and digitize these and hundreds of other archival collections that document the rich and diverse history of Muncie and Delaware County. These archival materials have provided our community access to a thoroughly rich and unique set of resources that have preserved the legacy of so many important people and organizations in our city. So certainly a debt is owed there. I'd also like to thank Chris Fluke, the Delaware County Historical Society, and all of the other members of the Hurley Goodhall statue community. You're doing excellent work, important work. It makes me really proud to be a Munsonian, just to consider the importance and significance of supporting public art that honors a truly important person. So thank you so much. And I'm really proud for the opportunity for the archives to play a small part in contributing to this effort. And lastly, of course, I'd like to thank Hurley Goodhall himself. I'm so thankful that you're able to be here with us tonight. I'd like to thank Hurley for his years of tireless, selfless, and courageous leadership here in Muncie, in the State House and elsewhere. As a legislator and community leader, you worked with dedication, vision, and determination to ensure fair representation of all citizens of Muncie and the state, and to advance causes of African Americans and other underrepresented persons in this community. Very, very significant work, and you did it very, very successfully throughout your career. You're a proud Munsonian, and your work in politics and community development demonstrated a steadfast dedication to improving quality of life and place in the region. And as a scholar and historian through the Center for Middletown Studies, your work has been pivotal in documenting the culture, legacy, and history of African Americans in Muncie. So thank you sincerely for that. It's been a pleasure to be a small part of this. I'm excited for you all to enjoy this excellent and exciting exhibit, and please consider contributing and purchasing the items here to contribute to the statue effort. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael. You had more than just a small part in it. Mayor Dennis Tyler is more than just the mayor in this room right now. He was also a really important colleague of Mr. Goodall's through his career. And I invite you to come up and maybe share a couple of memories, if you might do that.
I'll be glad to do that, Carl. Thanks. And thanks for everybody being here and supporting Hurley and in this project. It means so much to our community, and Hurley has meant so much to our community for so many years. And I look at this drawing here, and it says a Muncie icon, and to me, Hurley's not just a Muncie icon, ladies and gentlemen, but Hurley is a rock. And what I mean by that is Hurley was a rock standing up for things that he believed was right for his community and his race when it wasn't popular to do. But he still stood there and he fought that fight. I watched him do it on the fire department. I also watched him stand up for firefighters when it wasn't the popular thing to do. I watched Hurley in 1976 agree to become a member of the local 1348 executive board with me when we knew that we were getting ready to head into a fight that wasn't going to be very pretty. But we thought that it was time for us to have a contract. We thought it was time for us to be recognized. We thought it was time for us to have health insurance and pension benefits and a lot of other things that we weren't able to do. And Hurley, at that time, ladies and gentlemen, his pension was not vested, which meant that he could lose his pension if we did anything that we could be arrested for. And yet Hurley stood up and said it's time and it's the right thing to do. And I can remember right over at the old city hall right there on East Jackson, him telling the city attorney, when the city attorney made a comment about all of us being in the mayor's office, and Hurley invited him outside into the middle of East Jackson so he could punch him in the nose. Needless to say, we didn't end up outside, but we did end up with a contract. The first contract. I also had the great pleasure of sitting in a little house out in southwest Muncie with a group of us sit down to encourage Hurley to run for the Indiana General Assembly. And Hurley's first comment wasn't anything about him. It was what could he do for Muncie? And what could he do for his community? And how can I get elected? And at that time, if you know the history of Muncie, asking an African-American man to run for office on the south side of Muncie, in southwest Muncie, was not an easy challenge. But he did, and he won going away. And he walked into that Indiana General Assembly, was a member of creating the Indiana Legislative Black Caucus. There would not be a Martin Luther King holiday in the state of Indiana today if it was not for Hurley Goodhall when he served in the Indiana General Assembly and State Senator Ali Craycraft. It was those two trailblazers that made that difference. To think of a statue going across the street of #1 fire station, and when Hurley went on the fire department, that was the only fire station that African Americans could work in. They never left that station, did you, Hurley? They never sent them. And that's just the truth. That's just the truth. When I was fortunate enough to be hired in 1965, we had 3 African Americans in the member of 9. That was more African Americans at that time than had ever been hired in the history of the Muncie Fire Department. Hurley was a trailblazer there, along with Chuck Sanders and John Blair, which most of you probably don't know unless you're from the African American community. But Hurley has been a rock for this community, ladies and gentlemen. He's never been afraid to say his piece. Sometimes he didn't always say that in the best language, but he was never afraid to say his piece. I watched him stand up and represent organized labor in that Indiana General Assembly when it wasn't a popular thing to do. But I also watched him stand up and blister the organized labor because they didn't have their act together. And he told them, go back and figure out what you're doing and then come back and talk to me. But I can't represent you and I can't get anything done if you don't even know what you want done. So Hurley is an icon in this community, but he's a rock. I love him. He's been a great mentor to me. He was a blessing to have the opportunity to work with because he was never afraid to say what he felt. And to see a man that was willing to put everything that he had on the line to stand up for what he thought was right for and there wasn't any women on the fire department then, the men that he worked with and put everything on the line for that. I knew that we was going to be successful because of the Hurley Goodhalls. So thank you so much, and whatever you can give to help this statue be erected, it's a monument in time that will be an infinity forever for a great human being. So thank you so much.
It's very humbling for me to be able now to introduce Julius Anderson and Mr. Hurley Goodhall.
Good evening, everyone. Hey, could everybody just come away from the door, just spread out a little bit. The food's over on this side. We'll take a little quick break here while I set up my little prop here just a moment. Great food over here now. Come on over this way. There we go. There we go. You'll be all right. Again, thank you everyone for making this journey out this evening. I'm Julius Anderson, and my lovely wife, Belinda. This is her uncle, and we all just call him Uncle Hurley Goodhall, Uncle Hurley. So it's a blessing to be here this evening, and he's my prop, so we're going to do a couple of little things here together or whatever. But I just want to say, on behalf of all the Goodhall family and his son, who's in Florida, that they say thank you so much. It's such a blessing to reach out to this gentleman and this legend, a living legend at that. And by the way, Mr. Goodhall has done so much for our community, so much for our state, and yet he's still doing a lot just by being in the presence right now. So I just want to say thank you so much for all that you are doing in the life of the Honorable Dr. Hurley Charles Goodhall. Thank you. Okay, all right. So let me just give a snapshot of Mr. Goodhall's life, just a snapshot. Some things are, but it was real. We got to remember where he come from and how he got to where he's at today. Just a quick snapshot. On May the 23rd, 1927, just before the Great Depression, Hurley Goodhall was born in Muncie, Indiana, at 1416 Butler Street. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. At the age of 3, his father died, and life was really tough for his whole family. Mr. Goodhall attended West Longfellow Elementary School, McKinley Junior High School, and graduated from Muncie Central High School in 1945. Mr. Goodhall was bothered by the fact that he went through all of his classes through school and never saw or met an African American teacher. Just a short story. There's a person by the name of Geraldine Burns. Everybody call her Jerry. And she's still around. Yeah. But Jerry and Hurley Goodhall started off at West Longfellow when they was in the first grade, all the way through through high school, they were together. And Jerry said to me, maybe a month or so ago, when Hurley went to visit her, Hurley, do you remember our 3rd grade teacher, Miss Mary? He didn't remember, but she did. She's sharp. What she was trying to say and what she said way back then is the reason why we're here tonight. She seen something in Hurley that's today. She said, he's very smart and he's going to be somebody one day. And Geraldine held on to that. And that's one reason why we're here tonight. Because the fact that she saw something in him way back in the 1920s. And yeah, he's still here right now. When Hurley was in high school, he was a part of the Muncie Central football team. And back in those days, and I won't mention the city, they had to go out of town to play another team. Well, when they loaded up the bus and went to their designated area, they stopped to get something to eat. And when they stopped to get something to eat, the coach told all the guys to get off the bus, except for you 6 African Americans. It was a very turning point for him, because they got to go and eat in the restaurant. Hurley stayed on the bus. One of the coaches came and gave him a sack lunch. But that wasn't the end of the story. When they went to the hotel, everybody jumps off the bus, 2 by 2. I got this room, I got this room, I got this room. No, you boys stay on the bus. What had happened, the coach had called in advance and made some arrangements for some colored families to take them in. Now, at the time, he was angry. He was distraught somewhat. But he later became appreciative of it because he said, we had a good time, didn't we? Yeah. Okay. So that was a turning point in his life. Upon graduation from high school, Muncie Central High School, Hurley entered the United States Army. And he served in the United States occupation of Japan. But when he returned back to Muncie, Indiana, he married his high school sweetheart, Freddie Wine. And the union between the two had 2 sons, Hurley Jr. and Fred. Mr. Goodhall has worked very hard to help African Americans get jobs in Muncie. And this is how he started off doing it. He helped persuade the companies like Pepsi-Cola to hire African Americans. Because at one time, right here in this beautiful city of Muncie, African Americans couldn't get jobs. But he stood on the line to help African Americans get jobs. One thing that I didn't say is the 3 things in which I have just gained on my own from listening and leaning and gleaning from that of Uncle Hurley is that he's an activist, he's an author, and he's an historian. And so all 3 of these phases still today is a part of his life. Mr. Goodhall was one of the city's first African-American firefighters. He was also the first African-American appointed or elected to the Muncie School Board. He was the first African-American in the state legislature elected from Delaware County. Mr. Goodhall has been fortunate to be involved in publishing several books, including A History of Negroes in Muncie, published in 1976. Okay, as a Inside the House was published in 1995. Okay, that book was about his time in the House of Representatives, all during his time. And then he was also a part of the other side of Middletown. And this book was a part of, just like the other side of Middletown, was a project done by Ball State University students and the citizens of the Muncie African community that won the Margaret Mead Awarding for Excellence in Anthropology in 2004. So he involved all of the citizens, the African-American citizens at that particular time in Muncie, using through Ball State University. He had all of them working together and doing that. Mr. Goodhall has had several, he has served on several boards, and a whole bunch of them to be exact. But I just want to mention maybe 1, 2, or 3 of them. He was an original member for the Community Foundation, an original member on that board. He was a member of the First Merchants National Bank board. I like that one. And also the Muncie Whiteley Community Board. But he's on so many of them. I just picked 3 of them out just for an example. Mr. Goodhall has received hundreds of awards. I mean, his house is just packed with them. All kinds of awards. But here's some just locally, and I kind of want Curtis to listen to this one, because he received the President's Award from Ball State University. And in 2007, the Honorary Doctor of Law degree was presented to him by President Joanne Gore. So he has received a whole lot. And one thing I had not spoke about is the fact that in Indiana, the highest award is the Human Rights Award. And Rosa Parks, and we know who she was, a civil rights leader, she received the highest award in Indiana. Hurley Goodhall got the second one. So what I'm trying to say is that he's been a man on a mission. And in all 3 of those areas in which he has tapped on being an activist, he wanted to see something change. He said, I don't want my son to grow up to be like I did. So when he came on the school board, he went out and helped bring in African-American couples from down south to here. So at one time, there was 46 African-American teachers here in the Muncie Community Schools, because he didn't want his children to face what he did. So he did something about it. So in the area of being an author, where he has several books he has helped author, and 4 of them he has done as well. And historian, well, that's why we're here again. Just being, so he always give back. Even though he retired, he still gave back. So ladies and gentlemen, please, with all that you have in you, and I know this is a short time, but can we just show this man some appreciation? The Honorable Dr. Hurley Charles Goodhall. I know. Okay, so it's okay. Okay. As you can see, he's kind of emotional right now. So if I stay around a little longer, I'll get like that too. But thank you again. And now I turn it back over to Carl. Thank you again for all
Thank you so much, Julius. And thank you, Mr. Goodhall, for being with us tonight. Enjoy the show.
Talk about the license plate.
Yes, Mr. Anderson, there's one more story to tell.
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson had invited me to tell another very important story about Mr. Goodhall as a supporter of the arts in our state. Many of us are driving around with a license plate that supports the arts. And how many of us know, I didn't know until yesterday, that Mr. Goodhall is responsible for that license plate.
And all the other license plates will follow.
And all the other license plates that follow. Yes. So, Mr. Goodhall drives around with number 2 on his license plate, on his Arts license plate. And the first one that he received is over there displayed on our food table. So please enjoy food, enjoy the license plate, enjoy the show, and if you're so moved, please help us support this statue effort and purchase for yourself a bit of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you.